Welcome to another Wednesday at the Well. It's November 18th, 2020. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday at the Well.
What?
You're supposed to be
Oh,
getting work
okay.
done. Anyway, it's good having two of you. I can have him doing the work, and I can be playing around doing this. Okay, we'll be serious now. Welcome to another Wednesday at the Well, November 18th, 2020, and we're going to be looking at thankfulness or thanks, giving thanks. And when I began studying, I got really frustrated because everywhere I looked up thanks in the original language of the passage, the Hebrew in the Old Testament, thanks said like casting forth or casting. Um, and then in the Greek, it was some form of the word grace. Like if you looked up thanks, you would see grace or good grace. The Greek word is charis, which means grace. So it's frustrating. For instance, in the Hebrew, if you look up horse, it's Susa, and that's horse. So what I'm trying to communicate is if you look up thanks in the Old Testament, you'll see casting forth. It's not a direct match. Or in the New Testament, if you look at the Greek, it's some form of the word grace. And I know I'm being redundant here, but I'm just trying to communicate the point. It was really frustrating. You want to see a word for word match, right? And it's not there, which is interesting. Um, in Romans 1:8, it says, I thank my God for you. And in the Greek, you might read it as, I good grace my God for you. It's confusing, and I'm probably confusing you. But then it dawned on me that thanks has God's imprint on it in the Greek. It has Christ's imprint on it. Thank is Eucharisto, which means good grace or God's grace is good. So the whole of Romans 1:8 says, First I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed in all the world. Now, in verse 8, in the very beginning there, thank is Eucharisto, which means good grace, or God's grace is good. Charis is the Greek word for grace. You might remember another word for thanks is gratitude, and it comes from the Latin word gratis, meaning free. So gratis, free, grace, gratefulness, thankfulness are all tied together in our history. It's pretty interesting. I never knew that before. I thought when I looked up thanks, we all see the list of verses in the concordance or whatever, but I never expected to see the whole concept of grace, that you can't say thanks in the Greek without connecting it to Christ's grace and so forth. Gratitude, all that stuff. It's all tied together. Let's look at another verse. 1 Thessalonians, or a section of verses. 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 16 through 18. And it also has grace communicated in the Greek. Even rejoice has a form of charis in it. So rejoicing is even directly connected with Christ and grace and what Christ did from the Greeks' thought of the word thanks. And in this passage, we also see thanks and Christ in the verse. Or I'll read it. 1 Thessalonians 5, 16 through 21. Rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Do not quench the Spirit. Do not despise prophecies, but test everything and hold fast what is good. So in verse 16, rejoice. Our English word there in the Greek has a form of charis, grace in it. Let's see, verse 18, give thanks. We've talked about that. Thanks has a form of charis in it. So it's all intertwined, and it has God or Jesus imprint on it. In the original language, you could not think of thanks, excuse me, or use the word thanks without thinking of the word of Christ. It's pretty interesting. It gives me a whole new concept of thankfulness, and Thanksgiving coming up. Remember the word grace, asking somebody to say grace at the meal. Gratis, gratitude, grace, charis is grace. It's all mixed together. That's where we get our word grace. Can you say grace? And what you're saying has roots in, can you remember what Christ did in how we got the meal, or his provision? You can't thank Christ for the meal without even thinking of the work that he did, because it's unmerited favor. So the meal is unmerited favor, and then in a larger picture, Christ dying on the cross and being raised from the dead for in our stead, in our place. We can't disconnect those really in the language. It's just there. I thought that's interesting. I never saw this stuff before. So in thinking of all this, I was thinking we really need to up our game with thanks, or I need to up my game when I think of thanks. I went and did some studying in Exodus with the people of Israel. Here I wrote it out for you, for us both to look at. The green represents what the people did in that passage, how they believed in a good way when they responded to what the Lord did. The blue is what the Lord actually did for them, and the red is not a good response for what in a response from according to what the Lord did. And you can just see how it's mixed together, and I'm like that. I'll have something from the Lord in my life that I would think would be really good, that would move me to thanks or worship or praise, and then later on, there I'm in the red, not being thankful because he might not. He was there for the last thing, but he may not be there for this new trial that I'm going through. But Exodus 4:30 to 31, we can see there the people believed the Lord. The Lord visited his people. He saw their affliction, and they bowed their heads in worship. You can go back and look at these because we just don't have enough time to go through all this. Exodus 5:20, 22, the people accused Moses, and Moses accuses God. There might be a little bad attitude from Moses there, but I think he was being part of his confronting God on the issue was just a question, and God honors him with a response. Exodus 10:3, Pharaoh won't humble himself. It's kind of expected that he wouldn't respond well to an act of God. Exodus 11, favor with the Egyptian people. Even the Egyptian people were responding to a work that God had did. And then Exodus 12, 50, the Passover statute, and the people did as commanded. They put the blood on their doorposts, and that was a good response. And then they exit Egypt, Exodus 13, and the pillars of the cloud and the fire are guiding them on where to go. And then look at that. So all this stuff, the Passover and the things in Israel that they saw, like the firstborn being killed, and how they were spared, the plagues, and they were spared their firstborn being killed because of the blood on the doorposts, and the pillar of cloud and fire. All these works, and Exodus 14, the people complain about Egypt blocking them off and going to attack them. And I would complain about that too, I think. But I don't know. Hopefully I would think about the works of God right, previous to that. But I can't complain about Israel because I've got a short-term memory like they do. I've had miraculous things happen and then forgotten them. And remember, we're talking about thanks and being thankfulness, and how we need to, and I need to up my game with being thankful and remembering what the Lord has done. Because what we see in these chapters is forgetfulness, right? We see good responses, but we see forgetfulness. Okay, so Exodus 15, Moses and the people sang a song, and they camped by the springs. They're really blessed and giving thanks and praising God and worshiping God. And then Exodus 16, verse 45, Exodus 16, they're 45 days out from leaving Egypt, and they grumbled. So from a span of 45 days, they have all this stuff. So it's not like they have 10 years to forget. It's 45 days. But we do have attitudes like that. Remember when Jesus came upon his disciples in the garden, and I believe he came upon them 3 times, and they were sleeping, and he was, can you guys stay awake? So we're weak, and the Lord knows that we're weak. And we see the love of God that he keeps performing for Israel, even though they aren't thankful, even though they do forget. They go beyond not being thankful. We go beyond not being thankful. We in our heart, we have seeds of criticism toward the Lord sometimes, or we're inclined to that. So 45 days out, they grumbled, and then God gave them the quail and the manna. Exodus 17, that's when Moses struck the rock. It's a huge rock. I'll put a picture on here. And they were grumbling, and God provided for them. And then Exodus 18, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, he hears about all that God is doing, and he gives thanks. You get the sense that he's thankful, but he's like, yeah, like, yeah, God, yeah, you took care of your people. And then Exodus 19, after 90 days, they're later at the mountain where they received the law. And there, Moses, Joshua, and God are taking care of business. And then we got the golden calf. They not only weren't thankful, but that led them into a really bad sin. So that looking at this passage guided me to really consider that my not being thankful could actually lead into a darker heart. So everyone has the ability to see God's free provision. Thankfulness is the response of God's grace or free favor. Forgetting to thank Him leads us to overlooking what God has done, like not noticing it, and it distances us from God. Let's go to Romans chapter 1. This is going to seem like an extreme for those of us that want to be thankful and please God, but let's look at it with open eyes, because this is who we once were. So Romans chapter 1, verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. So see, the world, just like Israel, can see the works of God. Verse 20, for His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things which have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became futile. Okay, so they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became, and here's what happens at the extreme of when we're ungrateful and don't notice the Lord. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Just found that really interesting. That's Romans chapter 1, 18 through 23. And we see the road that the world has gone down, not acknowledging God, not giving thanks to God. And so without Him, they devise their own things. You know, Mother Earth. Let's thank Mother Earth. Or the Hindus, you know, being afraid of the God in the trees, or that a God of nature of something was going to trip them up. So there's God's works. Remember, like in Exodus, the works that God did for Israel, and we either remember it and are thankful, and we look accurately at where it came from, and we grow closer to God, or we don't notice the works. Well, we notice the works, but we don't attribute them to God, and there's no reason to be thanking Him because we don't attribute them to Him. We'd rather not, and we think the wrong thing, and it leads us down a road. Further on in this passage, it even talks about God. Okay, if you don't want to acknowledge me, I'm just going to let you go down your road. And you know, I don't want that. You know, as a believer, I want to like draw closer to God. You know, it reminds me of that passage. Do not be like the horse or mule that needs both bit and bridle to keep it in check, but draw near to God. And it reminds me of the parable where he says, "Be careful to what you pay." He says, "Pay attention to what you hear, for the measure you use, it will be measured unto you." And it talks about if we value God and are thankful, and we seek Him, that we're given what we ask for, and then even more. I should say, given truth more than we ask for, and then even more. So, this is just great stuff. I don't know, it changed my world as far as viewing thanks. Like when I say thank you, thanks, where it came from, and that it's connected with gratitude and grace and charis, and Christ. Pretty neat stuff. So thanks for listening, and next time I see you, tell me what you think of this. I'd like to hear your opinion. Love you guys.